Now, Camogie Inside the Championship is a new two-part documentary that airs this Thursday, November 6th and 13th on RT1 at 10:15. The series brings us behind the scenes of this year's All-Ireland Camogie Championship, and I'm delighted to be joined by director Ross Whitaker. Ross has produced documentaries on Katie Taylor, Shane Lowry and Rachel Blackmore, to name but a few. Ross, how are you?
I'm great, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thanks for coming along. I suppose, first of all, just wanted to wonder how a documentary like this comes about.
Well, that's a little bit of a long story. No, I mean, it was something. It started as a conversation actually a good few years ago in terms of the idea of could you follow a championship for any Gaelic game through the year. Like no one had ever kind of done a multi-angled, multi-access. And I think we probably first talked about it before the kind of like the Formula One docs and the Netflix docs that have ended up doing that kind of thing. You know, I'd been talking to Paula Fahey in RT about it, I think when we were finishing off the Katie Taylor docs, that's like 2018. And we talked about the different sports. And then at one stage, Paula was like, I think it should be Camogie because that's the one where the least stories have been told. And so that nugget got into my head, and we had a few conversations over the years. And then last year we just said, look, let's go for it and try and get some funding, which we did through Commission na Man. It's a way of getting funding for kind of Irish cultural work, you know. So that's kind of how it came about, yeah. And
I suppose you have a rough plan of how a documentary like this is going to go, especially when you're following something with a structured series like your round robin and your championships. Early on this year, something that you couldn't have accounted for crops up in the Scort story.
Yeah, I mean, and you wish you knew it was going to crop up in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like it so came out of the blue for us, even that we're following Aisling Marr and Katie Power, who were the two captains who ended up being in the centre of the pitch and had that conversation with the referee. That little conversation that a few weeks later led to a change in the rules. You know what I mean? So thankfully we were following Katie and we were following Aisling, and we were able to get, I suppose, the human side of that experience from them, and be inside the story while that was all happening. So there was a godsend, because I suppose in a way, as much as like there was turmoil in it for the characters involved and so on, and you don't want to see that, and they're amazing people who you come to really like and respect, you know, but it was a microcosm of, I suppose, the issue within the sport, in that you have a sport, it's a national sport, it's a phenomenal sport. Like, you know, we don't get as many people at the Camogie Games as we do at a hurling match for men, or even ladies football match or whatever. But I've been to so many games this year, and so many of them have been absolutely fantastic. So, you know, I'm losing my train of thought now. But anyway, like the games are amazing. So, but with the Scorts, so you feel like Camogie is not getting the attention it deserves to some extent, and maybe it's a little bit behind in many ways. And something like Scorts was a really good way of being able to show that in microcosm. And I know there's more issues, obviously, over the next couple of years that are going to be coming along, but that allowed us, I suppose, to see that side of it.
You say that you attended a lot of games this year. Was there anything that surprised you?
Loads of things surprised me. Like, I mean, I'm so glad we got to do it. Like, just from a personal experience, you know, they're the most amazing bunch of people probably I've ever met. I think the dedication, I mean, you know, I risk boring people by going on like the dedication of sports people. It's, you know, but it is there like 7 days a week. Those women are thinking about Camogie and how to get better at it. And in a way, the reason to mention that is to say that it's showing. Do you know what I mean? Like that dedication towards like physicality, diet and nutrition, sleep. Like so many players are obsessed with getting their sleep right. You know what I mean? And with everything else that's going on in their lives outside of the sport, the performance levels are going up and up and up and up. And like you only have to watch the final or any of the knockout matches to see the level of performance. And particularly, I think, what's quite exciting, and I know the players really love this part of it, is that the physicality has increased a lot, which maybe some people would feel like, oh, you know, it's hurling, there's so much skill involved, but it's such a hugely physical game, and they are absolutely tearing into each other, and it's kind of unbelievable to watch.
Yeah, it's one of the first things that struck me, and I mean, I know I'd see it firsthand, but it's highlighted so much in, like, Katie Power arrives out in one of the opening shots in Sleepless Top, and you're just like, these athletes are absolutely ripped. You know?
Yeah, they are. They are unbelievable athletes. Like, and the pace, like we would have had a lot of cameras at some of the later games in particular. We had cameras at a lot of the games, but then as it goes further into the championship, like obviously the TV element of increases, where RTE will show the knockout phase, and so then we get access to a lot more cameras, and like you're going through some of the footage and like some of the slow-mos of people just running at full tilt, carrying the slitter on the hurl, with people literally like leathering into them and still being able to maintain that pace and that focus and that line of attack, and to then, while all that's happening, come up with like the perfect pass. You're just watching it in absolute awe when you see that kind of footage. And as I said, that game has moved on so much. The players will say it themselves, and they're all trying to keep up with that as well. So they're pushing themselves harder and harder and harder and harder. And I just think it's a sport that people should be probably taking a bit, well, look, don't be telling people what to do, but I certainly am now taking a lot more notice of it, having done this.
Yeah, especially we saw this year, it was probably in the media for some of the wrong reasons. And a lot of the time when we speak about women's sport, when it gets to like that national stage, it's because something has gone wrong, as opposed to highlighting what's gone right.
Yeah.
Is that a hope for this documentary?
I really hope so. I mean, I think, well, yeah, ultimately, yes, I suppose. You don't go into it with those kind of motives. You just want to tell a great story and really find really good characters and tell the sporting story, and then try and tell the off the pitch story and try and blend those things well. Like that's what you're going into it. But then, having been kind of really impressed by it, I think I'd like, you'd hope that people might tune into it a bit more and see what's there. But it's also, and just a shout out to RTE. Like RTE obviously do show the matches, and that's great. I think, the level of coverage lends so much to a sporting event. So, if you go to the All-Ireland final and you see the number of cameras there, the level of production value, all those kinds of things, it just heightens the experience of watching something. Whereas, when you're watching say a club game, or you're watching a Camogie game or a ladies football match, and there's like one or two cameras or something, it just is never going to feel the same. So I feel like if Camogie was given the kind of treatment from a production value point of view of some of the other sports, then we'd actually start to really appreciate what's there. And I think I'd love to see that. And maybe I wouldn't go as far as to really believe this documentary is going to make a huge difference, but maybe if there's more stuff like this over time, why not build an audience for it? It's, RTE have the rights, like, get people watching it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we saw it with the semi-finals this year being televised on RTE properly, as opposed to, and fair play, it's great that we have streams of all the round robins in the league games, but they don't look as good as the men's because of the production, not because of what's actually happening on the pitch.
Makes such a difference. That really struck me this year, actually, is like, I've been at games like this, Galway against Waterford was like the last round club match, or round robin match before the knockouts, in the group match is what I meant to say. And like that match was like literally level, like 1 point ahead, back to level. People absolutely hammering into each other until 4 minutes from the end. And then Galway and the amazing players from Galway just took it by the scruff of the neck and finished it out. And maybe Waterford ran out of steam. I'm not sure the exact reasons. They scored about 5 or 6 unanswered points. But that game was just tit for tat all the way through. Phenomenal game. I think it was streamed with one camera on YouTube. And actually, that game would have been a tremendous spectacle to watch, with the high production value. I think it would make a huge difference, and people would start, because, it's funny, I had people like come up to me, when Tip and Kilkenny played in the quarterfinal, and the same day the men's hurling semi was on, it was the same two teams, so the crowd really built as the match went on, and a lot of people tuned into it. Because they're waiting, they're sitting at home, they're having their lunch, they're waiting for the semi-final to come on. Honestly, that's really what some of these people are there for. But they watch the women's quarterfinal, and like, they come up to me after knowing that I'm doing what I'm doing, going like, I watched that quarterfinal, that was an unbelievable game, which it was, know. So you just go, when people start seeing that, then they're going to realise that there's a sport here that's being largely ignored by a lot of people that actually is really entertaining.
And you couldn't have picked a better year quality-wise in terms of the excitement of those games. Like Clodagh McIntyre's goal in that quarter-final was just something else altogether.
Unbelievable goal. I mean, and we were following Clodagh throughout the year. She's one of our main characters, amazing person. And yeah, so like, honestly, it couldn't have worked out better for us in that respect. It just turned out that a lot of the people that we were following had really great stories this year as well. So
Yeah, how do you choose at the start of the year who you're going to follow? Or is it kind of luck of the draw?
there was a bit of a look at the draw because it's the first time you're doing it. And also you're going into, I mean, anyone that's tried to interact with Gaelic games, it can be, you're dealing with a lot of people that are, dealing is the wrong word, but you're, interacting with a lot of people who are volunteers for a start and so on. And so you can't expect people to go out and do a massive amount of work to help you with casting because they have their own lives and so on and so forth. So we're sort of at the mercy a little bit of people going these people are quite good or whatever. And in some cases, actually, the management, and Dennis Kelly, and as we're talking about Tip, was really, really good with this. It was the management would think well, actually, if you talk to these 4 or 5 players, these are the ones that we feel can actually take this in their stride and it won't affect their performance. And they do have good stories and so on. So that bit of guidance helps. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd love to sit down and talk to every single member of the panel and find out their whole stories and then choose, but in the time that we had ultimately and the way the season goes, we didn't have really an opportunity to do that a little bit. And Carl Hannon, who was producing, did a lot of work in that respect. But yeah, it was really, really a lot of time give back and forth with the management and stuff like that. And the mad thing about Camogie is it's really almost 11 months around sports. So you're thinking, oh, this is the off season when people will be available to talk to us and that kind of thing. But no, it's they're playing for the universities, they're playing for their clubs, then they're playing in the league, and then they're playing in their provincials, and then they're playing in the championship, and then they're back to their clubs, and then they're into university. So you don't actually have a lot of downtime in the sport to kind of do that kind of background work. So you're always playing catch up with the players who are, just intensely playing their sport.
Yeah, and access is something I knew it was going to be behind the scenes, but disclaimer, I got to watch the first episode. Thanks very much ahead of time,
No worries, yeah.
I couldn't believe the level of access you got. Halftime during key games, tactic boards. At one stage, you can see the Dublin team discussing Katie Power written up in the tactics board.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I suppose honestly, with every county it was slightly different. The level of access or the type of access or the comfort level with certain things. And so that was a big part of building up relationships and navigating it in a way that made sure that everyone was happy. It was one team, we're happy for you to film A, but, not as mad about B. Maybe you can do it once or twice or whatever it might be. So, and then it was just a case of taking the best of everyone and putting it together. But yeah, the access was amazing. And we went in we were very cheeky in a way. We went to them and said, look, we're going to persuade everyone to do this. We want all access, everything, dressing rooms, everything. We're trying to create something really special. And we're just asking you, will you come along on this journey for the year and help us to try and show your sport in an amazing light? And, I would say maybe 80% people were like, okay, we get it. And I suppose, we got quite good at doing the pitch after doing it a few times.
You won't even know we're there.
Yeah. Well, and I think to a large extent it was like that. I think, people's heads were turned the first few times you're there and so on and so forth. And that's why we did try and start early. And there's a lot of footage we didn't use from earlier in the season. I was we need to get in there and be behind the scenes on some league matches and stuff so that when the championship comes around, it's oh, there's Ross with the camera, or there's Morris, or there's Helen, or whatever it might be. And that's essentially what happened. Yeah. And then, so but it was a lot of negotiation and a lot of conversations, but that's the nature of access. But yeah, we were lucky. We kind of got what we wanted in the end.
Yeah, I suppose one pretty obvious team that are missing from the action behind the scenes were the defending champions, Cork.
Yeah. And we'd hoped originally to, and in fact, we'd kind of had some early conversations with Cork that had been relatively positive. One of the kind of co-producing companies had actually filmed a bit with Cork the previous year, and kind of had built a little bit of a relationship there, and that had been part of our application actually, that Cork, had some involvement. So that was kind of ironic in the end, but. Ultimately, when we came back around to talk to all the counties, they said a very polite no, and we were absolutely devastated, frankly, you know. So, yeah, we approached them and they said, no, we just really want to focus on what we're doing and we feel like it might be a distraction. I mean, I don't remember the exact words, but, you know, essentially that's the nub of it. So, yeah. So the idea had been to follow the 4 semi-finalists from the previous year and then, you know, but we'd also been talking and thinking about, like, you know, Waterford and Kilkenny had been the quarterfinalists and we're like, they're 2 really good teams. And, but we were trying to narrow it down. So, you know, we were already in these kind of conversations and then it became obvious when Cork weren't going to do it. It's like, okay, well, look, there's 5 sort of senior teams that are in Division 1 and are, you know, likely, you know, potentially to be the quarterfinalists. It didn't work out that way in the end. But so let's approach the 5. And that's what we ended up doing.
It was great to get Waterford when they had that historic victory over Kilkenny in the
you
first
know,
time ever.
there was a lot of kind of like upsets, I suppose, along the way. Or I don't know if they'd call that an upset. Like, I mean, Waterford would definitely feel they had the beating of Kilkenny. I'm sure Kilkenny felt the same. But yeah, there was a lot of games that are very 50-50, you know. And I mean, even that quarter final between Kilkenny and Tip that we mentioned with Clodagh's goal, you know, was so tight, and, you know, so much so that it really came down to those 2 minutes where Laura Lannan for Tip saves Aoife Prendergast's penalty and then, like, literally goes down the other end and Clodagh scores a goal. I mean, literally, if Laura doesn't do that unbelievable save, then we're looking at probably a completely different result.
Yeah. And another thing we hear a lot of the time with female athletes is that people want the story behind them because then they're more likely to tune in, which I assume is exactly what this series will do. But there's this very special moment in the first episode with Orla Hickey and her dad, Ger, who's discussing how important that trip to Croke Park would be that summer. Like, there's a real human element to this. It's very moving.
Yeah, I mean, Laura's dad is very unwell. He was diagnosed with cancer. Orla, I've just been talking about Laura Lannan. So Orla had been planning to go and spend a year or 2 in Canada, and then her dad, you know, was diagnosed, which is, you know, such a horrendous thing to happen to any family. And she's such a cool person, and she decided to come home and just be with her family and play her sport. Like, she's an unbelievable sports person. She's playing soccer for Wexford now as well. Like, and Orla's just really open, and we filmed with her and her dad on a couple of occasions, and to see them in episode 2 then make trip to Croke Park for the quarter final and so on and so forth. It's very, very moving, really lovely family. And I mean, that's the kind of level of openness that people had with us, which is amazing. Like, we're so privileged to be able to do that.
And is it interesting for you, who followed so many professional athletes, like the likes of, you know, Rachel Blackmore, Shane Lowry, to now follow amateurs and see what the difference is there, if there is that much of a difference?
Wow, that's a really difficult question. How do you compare Shane Lowry to Aisling Maher or something like that? That's a tricky one. I mean, all you can say about all these people is, like, they just have immense dedication to what they do. They tend to all be, like, really cool and interesting people. You know, I think people that excel have something special about them a lot of the time, you know, and I never excelled at sports. So I'm fascinated by it. So, you know, all I can say, I suppose, is, like, the dedication that the Camogie players put in is exceptional. I wouldn't know how to equate one with the other than the fact that they all have jobs, which is such a cliche in a way. But, like, you're talking about, it's a 7-day-a-week commitment, you know, and which actually makes it really hard to film with them. You know, it's like, hey, can we do a little bit of you, you know, at home with your family or whatever? Yeah, but I have gym then, or whatever it might be. Even to this day, we're finished filming now, but, like, we did the last bit of filming a few weeks ago with a couple of interviews with players, and, you know, just trying to get people to fit us in for an hour-long interview is really, really tough. So, like, the level of dedication across all these things is amazing. And I suppose, like, that's just something that really comes across with the I know it's the same for all Gaelic games. Like, the dedication's insane, but, like, I think it's also really important, and this is something that I suppose I happily learned from doing this, is because you do hear about, like, sacrifice and dedication, and it's almost like sometimes, I suppose, wrapped up as almost like, not quite a negative, but, like, you know, that, like, almost like a level of unfairness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really unfair that they have to sacrifice all this, and, you know, and of course, like, if there's a way to compensate people, that's fantastic, particularly in the women's side of the sport, which doesn't get all the benefits of the men's side. But like the other side of this is like, obviously, number one, they choose to do it and they get so much out of it. Like, that's the wonderful thing, is like when you put your heart and soul into something, you get so much out of it. And you see the companionship, the community, the health, the life skills, all this, like, these people are glowing, you know what I mean? And they are living an amazing life, and all the sacrifice to them gives them this incredible opportunity to spend their life in this way, which I think is second to none in the period of time that you can do it, which is, I think, one of the reasons why they are so dedicated. Sporting life is, as an athlete in a fast-moving, explosive game is not that long. So that was one of the things, I suppose, that struck me, is they are getting a lot out of all the dedication they're putting into it.
That's made really clear as well with the fickle nature of sport, and you highlight a lot of the injuries as well throughout the series. But Ross, thanks so much for chatting to us. So that is
no worries, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
First episode of Camogie Inside the Championship airs on this Thursday, November 6th at 10:15 p.m. on RTE1.
Thank you.